Welcome to the Becoming Aware podcast, where I, Genevieve Faulkner, share what I'm becoming aware of.
Hello and welcome to the Becoming Aware podcast. My name is Genevieve Faulkner, your host, and if you're watching this today on YouTube, hi. So I thought I would do a video around abandonment wounds. Yes, they're a little bit similar to rejection wounds, but there's slight nuances within that kind of dynamic. Now, often like working with people, sometimes they will have an abandonment wound based upon the experience they've had with their parents growing up, particularly with regards to like early childhood. So, you know, I've done videos on anxious and avoidant attachment and whatnot. It kind of ties into that. Like when you've got an abandonment wound, that's often then creates issues with attachment. And it gets created, sometimes that can be like the beginning of an abandonment wound. Like if perhaps your mother, you know, disconnected for some reason, perhaps she went through her own trauma, she couldn't quite connect to the baby. That can create a sense of abandonment, but there's many other reasons why abandonment wounds occur. Sometimes it's actually something that is already programmed in the genetics. So the ancestors have gone through abandonment issues and it's a reoccurring pattern, and then it gets created again. You know, you have your own experience in childhood as a baby. What often occurs is there's layers to this, or there's different kind of root systems within the whole structure within the subconscious that's creating a kind of pattern, but also behaviors as a result of the abandonment wound. So we can have the belief that we're abandoned by our parents, but because, as I mentioned with the rejection wound, like if you believe that your parents abandoned you, then often you'll have the belief that you've been abandoned by source or God or whatever, you know, the higher power is. And also like you'll have a lot of the time the belief that you abandon yourself. Part of the reason for this is because when there's that sense of abandonment and you know, it relates to the parent, then it begins to create this kind of, you know, shock that causes a disconnect from source, right? Because it's kind of like whatever the experience is, it's just, you know, before we get here, we think that we can handle it, and then we get here and it's like, this is painful, this is scary, this is like too much. And so it disconnects from source energy. And then the more things go along throughout the person's childhood or throughout the experience with abandonment wounds, there can be an element of, in the trying to get back the connection that's required, there can be this self-abandonment process that gets created. So that's why people will often then have this abandonment wound of I abandon myself, right? Because they're trying to create connection with others through abandoning themselves because they learned from childhood that they are abandoned, right? That's the relationship dynamic. That's what is. Now, this creates a kind of void, like because of the disconnection from source, it creates an inability for somebody to fully own their own power. They'll kind of, in a sense, become a victim to reality instead of recognizing, oh, I have the power to create reality here. I can make things happen. Because when they're abandoned, it's like what they've asked for, what they're requesting, what they're requiring isn't happening. Like their needs have not been met. Nothing's been delivered. And so that's what they learn. They learn to live in a reality where they don't get what they want. They don't get to experience the connection that they desire or be able to create the reality where happiness and joy and all of their needs are taken care of, you know? And so it can create this sense in the disconnect from their own source energy. It creates a void, right? And that void creates a lot of feelings that are quite negative because it in a sense, like when you are abandoned by source and you're abandoning yourself and you're abandoned by your parents, that's depressing, that's sad, that's, you know, makes you feel incredibly alone. And so people with abandonment issues or belief systems, they'll have these voids within. They'll have sometimes like they will have these spiraling times, right? Where they'll go into this dark place. They'll feel really depressed. They'll feel powerless. They'll feel like they've got no ability to change their life, and a victim to the circumstances that they're experiencing. And when that's not worked on, they will create reoccurring situations in their life where the relationships they have mirror that abandonment. So, they'll attract partners that won't be able to hold them in whatever they're experiencing. They won't be able to be with them in a way that allows them to feel nurtured and cared for and safe. Instead, and sometimes it might be that they have an intentional behavioral pattern like that, or sometimes it might be that they attract people that are just unavailable. So they have other responsibilities, so they can't quite meet that need because of that, right? They just don't have the time or space or whatever. So there's a couple of kind of behaviors that get created when somebody's got an abandonment wound. So one is, when they abandon themselves, they basically learn, like with the rejection wound, they learn that, okay, in order to be received, connected to other people, then I have to effectively abandon myself, right? So they'll create a false persona. They'll create dynamic people-pleasing tendencies, if that's the case, to avoid being abandoned. But often, like with abandonment wounds, because there's that void and that, the depth of that, the darkness of that, there's often a part of them that has given up hope on possibility or on relationships, on someone being there for them. So they'll have this kind of way of functioning where, the glass is half empty, they're expecting the worst. They're expecting the worst in relationships. Like, what's the point? What's the point in connecting with someone? Because they're just going to let me down anyway. I can't rely on anybody. Sometimes it can create a control freak type dynamic within their world where they need to control everything because they need to do everything themselves because they can't trust anybody else to do it because they're abandoned, right? So it creates this place where there can be an element of like cynicism and distrust and hopelessness and almost like a rebelling against relationships working out because they're proving that they can't work out because, they're already abandoned. The world's already let them down. So with regards to all of that, now something else that they will also do is if they do let somebody in, they will control that person a lot of the time because they have that wounding. They will have decided that, that's the inevitable outcome of the relationship. And so they will try to stop that from happening, right? This isn't conscious, but they'll try and stop it from happening. And so they'll create all sorts of different ways in order to control the person that they're with or the people in their life to avoid that abandonment. And that can look like many different things, and none of it's something that's going to create greater for either person in that relationship, right? So all of this is changeable. And if like any of that speaks to you, like it is something that you're able to work through and heal from and release the energy of, and with that, you can begin to receive so much more. Like your connection to source changes, your connection to yourself changes, your relationships around you begin to change because you no longer have to validate the reality where you've been let down so dynamically and you've been disconnected from your own source energy. You no longer become the effect of everybody else's points of view and conclusions and judgments because you're not aligned with your own energy, right? You actually receive that energy from the universe, and that allows the energy of living to move through your body in a different way, and that allows you to not necessarily be stuck in that really dense energy of hopelessness or powerlessness or sadness or despair or whatever it is that you're in. So part of the process, if you've watched any of my videos, you know that I'm a theta healer. This is the method that I use to assist people to shift the subconscious belief patterns that they have. You're more than welcome to book one-to-one sessions. You're also more than welcome to come and attend basic class. The basic and advanced gives you the kind of foundational tools to be able to shift this stuff for yourself or work on other people and shift stuff as well. So that is one way. But one of the keys to shifting abandonment wounds is to recognize why this was created the way that it was. So just like with the rejection wound, there's always a kind of reason. It's often connected to like our being or our soul's journey and what it is that they were trying to experience through the kind of beliefs and the behaviors and whatnot that occurred in early childhood. So sometimes it is that they've chosen to incarnate into a family that has that programming because they want to change the pattern. And it's through the recognition of that, acknowledging their own being, meditation, connecting to the parts of themselves that perhaps they didn't recognize was them, right? Because when you're in a meditative state, you can connect more to the universe and you can begin to acknowledge the energy of who you are that goes beyond the definition of who you think you are, right? Because we all have these kinds of avatars that we're kind of playing, thinking that we're the character of, but there's so much more to our beings beyond that. And so the more you're willing to be in question and take the time to connect to the energy of your being, the more you start to heal the the disconnect between you and source energy or God or the higher power or whatever that is, and also your own energy. And when that occurs, then you have more of an ability to create your life. Sometimes it does require more shifting also to clear the original wounding if it's related to parents as well. So part of like the process with theta healing is to look at the gift of the situation, how it served the person, what they're learning from it. And when there's an abandonment wound, it's often connected to like claiming autonomy, claiming your own ability to create your life. You're connecting to your own source energy, recognizing who you are, acknowledging who you are beyond the other. Because in a sense, just like with the rejection wound, when there's that space, that separation, then you can begin to kind of like get a clearer idea of who you are, right? Because you're not kind of merged or blended with somebody else's energy. You're just being yourself. So there's usually this kind of journey of really reclaiming who you are, recognizing who you are, acknowledging that you have all of this power, acknowledging independence. With abandonment wounds, it kind of eliminates, in a sense, the codependent type dynamics, because you're no longer at the place where you're reliant on somebody else to survive, or you're trying to get things through the other person, because you've given up hope of that. You're like, nothing's coming for me, nothing's helping me, I'm gonna have to do it for myself. So in a sense, there's like an element of assertiveness and like being proactive and taking action and choosing for yourself that you can learn through the process of having abandonment wounds. And all of this is something that can be kind of like brought into your energetic field, or, we can train your subconscious to actually know how to be all of that for yourself without having to hold that wounding, without being stuck in the trauma of it, or without having to validate it all of the time. So there is a process to this. But yeah, if you are feeling like there's some of that behaviors within, and you're feeling like perhaps it's time to change it, you're more than welcome to get in touch if you feel like I might be able to help you. I don't know whether there's anything else I need to say about this, really. I guess, yeah, no, I think that's it. So thank you. It's a short one today, but yeah, thank you so much for listening if you've got to this far. And yeah, if there's any questions, you're more than welcome to leave them in the comments. If there's anything else you want me to do a video on, feel free to let me know there too. Thanks for listening, guys.